So one of the most frustrating parts of buying a Mac for anyone is when it comes to upgrading the RAM or the storage. The prices that Apple set for their upgrades are overpriced, no doubt about it. But now the landscape has actually changed quite a bit. And the main reason for that is the RAM prices. RAM prices have gone up primarily because demand from AI companies has just gone through the roof. In simple terms, having access to large pools of RAM makes AI faster because then it doesn't have to go through SSDs or whatever. RAM is just faster, so it can have lots of information that it can quickly access. Because of that, these companies are now buying as much of it as they possibly can. For 2026, a lot of the supply of RAM has already been bought up by them, which means it's actually only going to get worse over the next year, and RAM prices are actually going to continue to increase. That now actually makes Apple's pricing for upgrading their RAM more in line with what's going on with the current market. So to give you some context with regards to the pricing of RAM, lowest price was around early mid 2025. You could get a 32GB kit, so two 16GB DIMMs of RAM for around $70 to $90. Now, currently, January 2026, that is, this is actually crazy when I look at it. It's now gone up to $300 to $500 for the same kit, which is crazy because it obviously scales. A 64GB kit used to be $200. Now it's $800 to $900. Yeah, it's getting out of hand. With the prices of RAM going up so much, and with Apple's pricing currently being quite competitive in the market, I don't think it's going to stay like this. It would not be surprising if Apple start upping the prices of their machines and the RAM upgrades later on in this year. Maybe even in a few months. It might happen in the next month or two. It depends on when they're going to announce and release the sort of M5 Pro, M5 Max chips. However, Apple being Apple, I'm hoping that they've stockpiled as much as they possibly can so that consumers like us can go buy these machines without having to pay more. But in case they do up the prices, if you're thinking about buying a Mac, now is the time, guys. Now is the time to do it. So I have the M4 Max MacBook Pro with 36GB of RAM, and I have no intention of upgrading anytime soon. Not unless there is some absolutely phenomenal change coming up with the M5 Max chip. I think most people who have bought an M3 or an M4 Mac are actually completely fine. You most likely won't need to upgrade. If you have an M1 or M2 machine though, and you're starting to hit the limits of your machine, I feel like now is a good time to upgrade for sure. From speaking to friends and my own team who are also still using M1 and M2 machines, they seem to be very happy with their machines. Many of them are finding their machines just more than capable for what they're currently doing. The M series of chips are so good that people aren't needing to upgrade anywhere near as much as they needed to in the past. And I bet Apple are thinking, damn guys, we've done too good of a job here. I'm a big Mac fan. Ever since I got my first iMac back in 2011, macOS for me has just been superior compared to something like Windows. I actually use Windows pretty much every single day as it's part of my gaming setup. But my God, is Windows frustrating to use. The amount of issues I have when I just want to game. Sometimes drivers need updating, sometimes audio just doesn't work without rebooting. The machine will wake up for no reason. Yeah, it's so frustrating to use. And I feel for people who aren't technical because it must be even more frustrating for them. Mac and Mac OS, it's just easy. I'll go months without having to reboot my machine, and it's usually because I've had to do a security update or I'm doing something a bit hacky. macOS is also nowhere near as locked down as iOS or iPadOS, so you can hack things together quite easily. For example, I quickly vibe coded an app that automates the color temperature and brightness of my desk lamp throughout the day, but I can also adjust it manually if I like. This took me less than 10 minutes to make. No having to make a developer account, trying to figure out how to sideload things or anything like that. It's just very easy. MacBooks are also incredibly efficient. They're not as power hungry as Windows machines, so battery life is a lot longer and you can get a lot more out of them without needing a huge power supply. Now, which Mac should you buy? Well, I've made a few Mac buying guide videos on the channel, but I'm going to quickly break it down now. The MacBook Air. So if you're someone who mainly works in the browser, you do some design work, some light coding, writing up documents, simple things like that, the MacBook Air is the one to get. I have a MacBook Air here, which I absolutely love. It's such a delight to use, mainly because of how small, thin, and light it is. I actually kind of wish that Apple would make an even smaller version. Maybe it would be nice to see like an 11-inch or 12-inch MacBook. Now, of course, that is very, very small, but I think to myself, sometimes when I'm traveling, I don't need a machine this big, but I still want to have a proper laptop. Having a 12-inch or 11-inch laptop would be pretty cool. I understand that iPad can sort of fill that market, but I feel like the iPad for me, iPadOS just isn't as good as macOS. I also think the base model with the 16 gigabytes of RAM is going to be fine for most people. That's the model I have here. The only thing that might be worth upgrading for you, depending on your usage, is the storage, which you can upgrade for around $200. And if you do upgrade that, you also get the more performative chip as well, I think. The MacBook Pro. Now, if you're someone who's doing a lot heavier work, like video editing, 3D work, heavy AI work, or anything similar, the MacBook Pro with the Pro or Max chip is the one to get. It's harder to make one blanket recommendation for the Pro, primarily because there's so many variations to choose from, but I think most Pro users actually know what they already need. Like I said, I have the M4 Max MacBook Pro. This is specifically the 14-inch model. It's not as powerful or as thermally efficient as the 16-inch, but it handles everything that I throw at it. I also upgraded the storage in mine to 4 terabytes, which for me was well worth doing, primarily because of all the video work I do. Being able to have multiple projects going at the same time on my machine without having to constantly mess around with external SSDs is really nice. So yeah, if you're thinking about getting a Mac or upgrading your current Mac, now is the time to do it, guys, before the RAM prices start affecting the MacBooks, before Apple start upping the prices, because like I said, I feel like they will do it. I'm hoping that they don't. Let's all hope that they don't. But you know, Apple want to make a profit, so they will up the prices if the RAM shortage doesn't fix itself in the next couple of years, which it doesn't look like it will. We'll see what happens. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe for more.